my name is Emily Koopman and I will be presenting on behalf of Group 6 our research from the text, The Parable of the Talents. First, just to say, our passage in totality is Matthew 25, 14 through 30. But specifically, we're looking at Matthew 25, verse 24, which includes three clauses. 1, he also who had received the 1 talent came forward saying, 2, Master, I knew you, and 3, to be a hard man, reaping where you did not sow and gathering where you scattered no seed. On my right, I have Logos Bible software with our verbal filter on. Verse 24 starts right here where my mouse is. And certainly we are focusing on 2B, which is right here then where my mouse is, and in the green box where it highlights our verbal priority. We find that to be the most important of the 3 clauses, and I will tell you more why. First, our main idea is to connect the servant who is entrusted 1 talent with middle school students in the inner city. The connection here is made through the 3 points of our main idea, which is 1, that there's a lack of understanding about who their master is and what their master expects of them. In terms of the servant, we're talking about the master who entrusted the talent to him. But in terms of our students, we're talking about master as God. There is a lack of understanding in these students about who God is and what God expects of them. 2, in both parties, there's assumptions made where information is lacking or misguided. So in the context of our students, they're in violent areas, drugs, sexual activity, and some Jesus, and they see this kind of spirituality around them and assume that is what God expects of them and fills in. And just like the servant, he fills in thinking his master is a hard man. Then there's actions that follow these assumptions, and those are misguided and unfaithful to the master. The servant hid his talent, which was unfaithful in his actions, and our students fall into the same cycle of their environment and are unfaithful to God in that way. Proofs here are verse 24. We use our Bible software that shows that there's heightened emphasis in the verbal ideas presented. As we look at our passage analysis, we see the aorist tense verbs in red throughout the middle. That's our skeleton of Matthew 25, verses 14 through 30. But then we see right here where the blue is very peaked and very valleyed, which is our present verbs and our perfect verb tense. And specifically, we want to look at our present tense verb, which is held in 2B right over here. If you look at the bottom, there's a little white box. In this case, reap says verb, present, active. But we want to look at verse 24 and 2B, and it says verb, present, active, indicative, second person. And we see that this 2B and this accusation that the servant makes is where we should really be focusing, and our Logos Bible software helped us realize that this is where we get the main idea of our study. Also, proofs is the commentaries we used, and they support our main idea. Again, our main idea is that there is a lack of understanding, there are assumptions made, and then there are misguided and unfaithful actions that follow. In our commentary, we read, the servant's misperception of the master produces alienation, mistrust, fear, and then personal sloth. Misperception here goes along with our first and second point, that there's a lack of understanding and that assumptions are made based on those. And then there's produced, which goes along with our third point of misguided and unfaithful actions that follow. What is the importance here is that connecting the servant to our inner city students is that misguided information and actions do have consequences. Whether they are innocent or intentional, there are consequences to these actions. And the goal should not be to change actions, but to change the conception. In the case of the servant, it's kind of a coulda, shoulda, woulda if he would have known more about his master. But in the case of our students, we have the Word of God. We have the ability to tell them more about who God is and what he expects of them, and their actions will follow as they understand more about the character of God. Here are our sources, and we thank you so much for listening.